Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And people, we have a treat for you today. On the line with us, we have Anne Allen. We're going to be discussing her wonderful book, The Inheritance, gripping dual-time family drama featuring Victor Hugo. Now, guys, this is one book in a series of them, okay? It's called the Guernsey novels, and this is book 7 of 8. That's right, 8 novels within this canon. So you're going to want to head on over there to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through her personal site, anneallen.co.uk, to gather more information on all of the books, more information on Anne herself, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. So one more time, that's anneallen.co.uk. And I will say, Anne was brought to our network People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business, Sweet Spire Literature Management. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, give yourself the best gift you can possibly give, contact Sweet Spire and move it through them. And you can find out more information on them at sweetspireliterature.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. And first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction. Thank you very much for being a guest. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this. You have a number of books to discuss. We're only going to focus on The Inheritance today, but I know we have a lot of information to cover, Anne, and we're looking forward to it. Okay. Now, before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly and start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Okay. Well, I'm English, which you may have gathered by now. I was born in the middle of England, but my father was from Wales and was brought up by the sea. And I was drawn to the sea right from childhood when we had family holidays by the sea. And so I kept moving around quite a lot as I became an adult, and eventually got drawn to move to Guernsey. While I was there, before I was there, I was a psychotherapist, and that has been my main profession for my life. I was also the mother of 3 children. Sadly, I lost my husband in his 30s. So I was a single mum very young. And I did, unfortunately, move my children around quite a lot. Whether they have yet forgiven me, I'm not sure. But they certainly had an unboring childhood. But Guernsey, for me, felt the place to be. It's an island, 7 miles by 5, not far from France. It's nearer France than it is England. Isn't technically English, but comes under Great Britain. A lot of the names there are French. It used to belong to Normandy. And so it's got an interesting history. And I fell in love with it. I went there with my children, as I say, and set up a practice as a psychotherapist there. Eventually I did meet someone, and I lived with him. Unfortunately, it ended some years later, and I moved back very reluctantly to England. But because I had loved Guernsey so much, I decided I would write about it. By then, I wasn't seeing many clients. I was coming up to retirement age. My children had left home. I hadn't got to worry about supporting them. So I started writing. And it was cathartic for me to do that, because as a psychotherapist and as a lady who has had her own situations, her own problems and traumas, I was able to include that in my book. And it's a way of bringing out things that you don't always acknowledge are there, if you like. So it was good for me. I enjoyed writing the first book. It was fun because I didn't know what I was doing. So I just wrote it without any constraint. And it's only later when I realised how you should write books that it became slightly harder work. And I didn't realise I was writing a series until I'd written 3 books. so I was a little bit slow on the uptake, and then had to sort of rebrand my books with sort of matching covers, etc. And it's been, moderately successful, particularly in England. That's me and my background.
Anne, listen, I wasn't initially planning on going here so quickly, but after that description, how could I go anywhere else? Your background is in psychotherapy. Well, the logical next question is, Anne, how does one transfer from psychotherapy to writing 8 books? Talk to us about that. Where does that inspiration for writing come from?
It's not difficult because when you think about it, I've spent my life working with people on a one-to-one basis. In other words, sort of fairly intimate, spending fairly intimate times with people, because they're pouring out their problems, the situations they've found, and the dramas, phobias, relationship issues, whatever it is. And there's me trying to help them, guide them to move on from whatever has happened. Mm-hmm. You can't help but soak up some of this. And also, I found that I was learning from my clients as much as I hoped they were learning from me. Learning from me as a professional, not as a woman with her own problems, shall we say. But, dealing with other people and their problems is quite self-healing for me. It does mean that I absorbed a lot of information, obviously almost unconsciously. At that point, I wasn't planning to write novels, but it was interesting how much you begin to realize you understand the human psyche so much better when you work so closely with people over close to 30 years in the end.
And without further ado, let's jump right into the book, The Inheritance, gripping dual-time family drama featuring Victor Hugo. Tell us a little bit more about your narrative.
Well, first of all, Victor Hugo was the key for this book. I was fascinated by him. My son, who still lives in Guernsey, managed to leave children dotted around different places where I live. He lived down the road from where Victor Hugo used to live. It's actually the house now. I'm sorry if I'm sidetracking slightly here. The house that he lived in was eventually bought by the city of Paris, and so it's French. It's owned by France. I've got a flag there. The only bit of Guernsey that doesn't belong to Guernsey. And I used to walk past this house quite a lot, and I've been in it, and it's a mind-blowing place. It really is. And so I've always felt I wanted to write about him. But it was very difficult to decide how you would do it. How could anyone write a fictional account of somebody who's so famous, so out there as Victor Hugo? This was at the time when Les Mis, Les Miserables, was all over the world selling out on their shows. And of course, that's based on his book, which, by the way, he didn't entirely write in Guernsey, but finished the final part of it in Guernsey. So, that is what most people associated him. But there's the Hunchback of Notre Dame, was another famous one. And that was in a film. That was a film made about many, many years ago.
Yeah,
but he was a poet. He was a philosopher. He was all sorts of things. But basically, he fascinated me. And so I just had to think of us. So basically, I decided that I would have, as you've already said, a lady in the present day connected to a lady in Victorian times. So I decided that I would have a lady in Victorian times who went to work for him as a copyist. Because obviously in those days, no computers, no typewriters, everything by hand, and he needed copyists. And I wanted there to be a relationship between them that had like a question mark over it, to create a mystery, so that the girl in the present time, Tess, who is a direct descendant of Eugénie in Victorian times, wants to know what connection there is between Eugénie and Victor Hugo. I don't necessarily have to spell that one out, do I? In a way, what was the relationship? He was known to be a womanizer, had women all over the place, but as far as is known, never had an illegitimate child. And I realised I was advised not to go down that route particularly, because it could get me into trouble if I came up with one. Particularly as his descendants still have an apartment in this house in Guernsey. So he has living descendants there. So anyway, but I wanted a mystery. I wanted to see whether, did they, didn't they, sort of thing. And so I saw it the rough core of it. But I wanted to write about Victor, but the research was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. There are masses of books about him, and of course, most of them in French, which unfortunately I failed at O-level. So it isn't a strong subject for me, but I did manage to get a lot of books from the local library. There's an awful lot of stuff about him. And it was more a question of what do I leave out? There was just so much I could have put in.
Right.
And you can't do that in a novel. You have to be selective. Not make it too much like a textbook.
Mm-hmm. Again, here in the line with Anne Allen. We're discussing her wonderful novel, The Inheritance, gripping dual-time family drama featuring Victor Hugo, the Guernsey novels, book 7 of 8. Available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through her personal site, anneallen.co.uk. Anne, next question that I'd love to get into, as I stated, this is book 7 of 8. So there are 7 other novels that you've written. Now, I'm curious, in each of those books, do we follow the 2 women that have their lives juxtaposed in the book? Are we following Victor Hugo? Are we following completely separate characters, all revolving or around Guernsey? Talk to us a little bit more about some of these other books and really what connects all of them.
Right, okay, fair point, actually. My first book was set totally in modern day Guernsey, but it did reference the Guernsey occupation by Germany. This is the one part of Britain that was occupied by Germans. Mm-hmm. And it's historically, there's so much there that, and I'm sure a lot of your, American listeners will know about all this anyway, because it's been in lots of films and things. There is a film that was made recently called The Guernsey Literary Potato Pie Peel Society, which came out a few years ago, which was a big hit but well liked in America. And that is set there, but it was it's about the occupation. And that particular book was written by an American lady. So I know it's of interest to people. I wanted to include things about the occupation in my first book because it's a really big thing in Guernsey. Still to this day, they just recently celebrated, I think it's the 77th Liberation Day. I'm trying to work it out now. I might be wrong on that one. But when they were liberated in May 1945, can you imagine this little island was occupied for 5 years. Children were evacuated from it. Some never came back to the island. I mean, it was horrendous. So I could not recognize this. So I did do a little story in that first book, which happened in the occupation, but it had an impact on the people in the present day. And that was the theme for my next few books, always reference the occupation, but with different stories, obviously. So it's different characters. Some of them knew each other, but there are always new characters in each book. They're all standalone stories, so they can be read just as a one-off book. But they are written in a sort of chronological order. So if somebody wants to, they can start from the beginning, then they will see different characters keep popping up through the foreign ones. Mm-hmm. So it was always, I love history, and I always wanted to reference Guernsey's unique background and history, what has happened to it over the years, particularly with the occupation. And I realised after writing 5 or 6 books about that, it was time to go to a different era. So hence The Inheritance going to the Victorian era, and the book following that has gone back to the Georgian era. And so it's sort of, going through the years, but still, so it's hopefully of interest to people that you've got new characters, different stories, all based on this small island in the English Channel.
Anne, what would you say was a highlight for you, either in writing this book, The Inheritance, or throughout the journey of writing all 8 books? What was something that you would say was a highlight, or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating prior to embarking upon this journey?
Well, the first surprise was I actually managed to write more than one book, as I hadn't really thought I would. But by then I wasn't really working as a therapist very much, and so I just sort of just wrote. But my first book came out in 10 years ago, first was published. So I haven't quite done one a year, but it's nearly. But certainly my favourite out of them all is The Inheritance, mainly because I feel, I really enjoy the story of it, and I enjoy Victor Hugo. It happened to be the year that his house that I mentioned, it had been closed for a couple of years for refurbishment. Not to make it look modern or anything like that, but, they had to tidy it up. The structure was suffering. It's an old house. And it was reopening, and my book came out the year that happened, and there was a big thing about Victor Hugo. He got dramas on English TV as well, and I was invited to speak at the Guernsey Literary Festival that year. Now, I'd been writing books about Guernsey for some years by then, but they finally decided to invite me, I think because my book was about Victor Hugo. And that, to me, was something that showed I had arrived, if you like. It's quite a prestigious literary festival. They have writers from all over the world come, and big names, as it were. So it was lovely to be rubbing shoulders with people like that and to be treated as an equal to them. So that, to me, was a big thing. So that came out of, I think, writing that particular book. I had a really good year that year, shall we say. That was the year before the pandemic. Everything went a bit pear-shaped after that. But that was a really good year for me with the writing and the way that my book was received. It did actually get a couple of prizes, including the Reader's Favourite Prize, which is an American writer's prize.
Now, Anne, last couple of questions here as we close out of this fantastic interview. Listen, you've written 8 books. What's next? I mean, what's on the horizon? Is there a 9th in this series? Are we completely switching and going to start on something new? Talk to our listening audience. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, I must admit, I found my last book, which succeeded The Inheritance, called Her Previous Self, difficult to write because of the pandemic was taking over. And, I did find it a struggle. So I thought at that time, after that one, and 8 sounds a nice number, round number. And I thought, well, I don't know if I should write anymore. But in actual fact, I'm slowly coming around to the idea of number 9. But it will be in Guernsey. But it will be, it's more of a crime thriller. It will be, unless I change the plot completely, it's going to be a kidnap of a young girl in modern Guernsey. So it will just be solely in modern Guernsey. And the reasons behind this kidnap and what happens, etc. So it's going to be, yes, a different genre. It won't necessarily have any previous characters from the other books as they have had. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to perhaps just write and do another one. And whether it will be just this one-off or whether I'm now going to start doing a series of crime thrillers, I don't know. I won't answer that one. I'm not going to commit myself to anything at the moment. But perhaps I should just try a few more.
There you go. The gift that keeps on giving. Guys, I'm telling you, there's so much to be gained here. Last question here. And as an artist myself, I love having this platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in. Now, in this instance, other writers out there listening in. Now, I'd be doing my listening audience a severe disservice if I didn't ask this next question. You've written 8 books already. You have a 9th on the horizon, hopefully plenty more after that. But not only have you written the books, you've gone the extra mile and gotten the books published. And anybody that has been through the writing process understands writing the book is only half the battle, because getting it published is a gauntlet in and of itself, okay? And I'd love to take this opportunity and to steal any words of wisdom you may have for any new writers out there listening in. Anybody just starting out, what are some words of wisdom that you can relate to them?
Well, things have changed quite a lot since I started out. I wrote my first book, roughly, that is, 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was trying to get a publisher, a mainstream publisher. And although I got some quite nice comments from publishers, nobody was offering me a contract, which of course is what you expect them to do. As soon as you've written your first book, everybody gets offered a contract, so you think. It wasn't easy. But anyway, I carried on, and then I wrote more books. And then at that time, self-publishing became more acceptable and easier, thanks to people like Amazon, particularly, and Kobo, too. My books are available with Kobo as e-books. So I got my books professionally edited, professionally covered, formatted, etc., etc. And I have my own imprint. So I just set up as a publisher, basically. I got my books published because at the end of the day, I thought, why should I spend years trying to see if I can please a particular editor as a publisher? In actual fact, whether I've done any better or worse, I don't know. How can I tell, really? But there's a lot of self-satisfaction in knowing you've done it all yourself, and people still know about your books and buy your books, even though I have not, got a big publisher pushing them forward. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't like to perhaps have somebody offer me a nice big juicy contract. But what I was saying, my words of wisdom, if you like, would be keep going. If nobody does come knocking on your door trying to offer you a contract, and to be honest, it doesn't happen very often these days. Go for it. Get your books out there. If they're any good, people will buy them, read them, and tell other people. And that can be self-satisfying, and also you can earn, a bit of an income. Not necessarily a huge amount, although we all know a lot of indie authors who have sold millions of books and have done very well out of it. But it isn't the norm. You have to be realistic. It is good, and it's really good to hold a book in your hand that you've written and published. I feel good about that.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And guys, you know what I love even more? Is we're at the end of the interview now. We've discussed so much information, and yet somehow we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, there's still so much left to be discovered. We've covered one book in an 8-part series. Okay, you know what you have to do. I'm going to say it for you once more, even though I know I don't have to, but let's re-impress it once more before we go. We're here on the line with Anne Allen. We just finished discussing her wonderful book, The Inheritance, gripping dual-time family drama featuring Victor Hugo, the Guernsey novels, book 7 of 8, all of which are available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, but check into her personal site, anneallen.co.uk, to gather more information on her, more information on these fantastic narratives, find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page, and also other books that are on the horizon will be there very shortly. So head on over there, get lost in the journey, and get a wonderful education while you're at it. And this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to talk to you.